Drive safe. Turn left. Turn left. This is where it ends.
Everyone, this is contact with International LT. It's the same engine as others. Um, uh, so to end my 16th anniversary with Talented causes, we're going to start in Texas, Brook, Texas, and and tires, and they're going to need a loan craft, which is golden metal. Uh, which is about only 1,400 miles from time. And after I got loaded up, I'm gonna go ahead and stream public stop shot and so,
Okay, here we go.
let me go on Facebook to
Recomputing.
change its first seat, and then we'll go ahead and take them up to Texas. So, let's get it.
Keep right, and then turn right. Turn right. Keep right, and then turn right. Turn right.
agent of chaos.
The candidates will have the opportunity to lay out their plans to address some of the most pressing issues for voters, including abortion rights, inflation, and immigration. Windsor Johnston, NPR News.
OxyContin maker Purdue Pharma says it is disappointed by a Supreme Court ruling rejecting a nationwide settlement that would have provided billions to combat the epidemic while shielding the wealthy family members who own the company. Justices today blocked the deal that would have the Sackler family contribute $6 billion to relinquish ownership of the company. The initial agreement was ruled against. Purdue Pharma would have emerged from bankruptcy as a different entity. Its profits used for treatment and prevention. The five-court decision weakens the ability of corporations and insiders to use bankruptcy to try to avoid mass litigation. The Justice Department is bringing charges against nearly 200 people for their roles in healthcare fraud schemes. The department says the alleged schemes involved some $1.6 billion in losses. NPR's Ryan Lucas.
Among the 193 defendants charged in the nationwide law enforcement effort were 76 medical professionals, including doctors and nurse practitioners. Here's Attorney General Merrick Garland.
The Justice Department has been clear that we will bring to justice criminals who defraud Americans and steal from taxpayer-funded programs.
One of the alleged fraudulent schemes involved over $900 million related to unnecessary amniotic photographs. Another involved more than $146 million in fraudulent addiction treatment services. Garland says with its enforcement actions, the Justice Department aims to protect vulnerable patients and defend programs funded by taxpayer dollars. Ryan Lucas, NPR News, Washington.
As electric vehicle maker Rivian looks to begin offering less costly vehicles, including crossovers, a huge investment from German automaker Volkswagen. They hope that happen. Rivian reportedly lost upwards of $39,000 in every vehicle it sold in the first quarter. Investment of up to $5 billion from VW could help Rivian reduce material costs. On Wall Street, the Dow's up 36 points. This is
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Kate Duvall. A woman is now demanding an outside investigation after her husband died just weeks after he was released from the Harris County Jail downtown. News 88.7's Lucille Vasquez has the news.
John Hill's wife says he complained about chest congestion while he was inside the jail for a probation violation earlier this year. Weeks later, he was found
major ways that the
Turn
agency
right.
penalizes those found to have committed fraud in the securities industry. Congress specifically strengthened the law in 2010 by authorizing the SEC to use independent administrative law judges to conduct hearings, make factual findings, and to impose fines on those accused of securities fraud. But today, writing for the court's conservative supermajority, Chief Justice John Roberts said that system violates the Seventh Amendment right to a jury trial. Although he acknowledged that under the current system, the accused do have the right to appeal in federal court, Roberts said that's not the same thing as having the right to be tried by a jury of one's peers in a courtroom supervised by a federal judge. In a rare oral dissent from the bench, Justice Sonia Sotomayor accused the majority of, quote, judicial aggrandizement and blowing up the so-called public rights doctrine. Under that doctrine, she observed, the court has, for more than a century, permitted agencies, when authorized by Congress, to penalize with monetary penalties those who have defrauded the government. Make no mistake, she said, today's decision is a power grab. Once again, the majority arrogates Congress's policy-making role to itself, and in so doing, she said, the court has cast a cloud of doubt over the way dozens of agencies carry out their congressional mandates. Congress, she said, had no reason to anticipate the chaos today's majority would unleash after all these years. Indeed, the court's decision could have huge ripple effects for agencies that use a process like the SEC's to enforce laws on everything from labor rights to mine safety and energy regulation. But as Case Western University professor Jonathan Adler observes, the court's majority did carve out an exception for agencies that deal with federal benefits.
The court doesn't touch Congress's ability to allow agency adjudication for public benefits and pensions and patents and things like that.
Indeed, the court's decision leaves intact the Social Security Administration's cadre of 1,500 administrative law judges who make decisions in 500,000 cases every year. The SEC case was brought by George Jarkissi, a former conservative radio talk show host and hedge fund manager who was supported by a who's who of conservative and business groups, plus some individuals like Elon Musk, who's repeatedly resisted the SEC's attempts to probe whether he illegally manipulated his company's stock. Jarkissi was investigated for fraud, and after a hearing before an administrative law judge, he was fined $300,000 and ordered to pay back $700,000 in ill-gotten gains. In addition, the agency barred him from various activities in the securities industry. Today's Supreme Court decision did not touch that $700,000 in restitution, just the fine. George Washington University law professor Alan Morrison says the court seems to be drawing a line between a fine
Turn right.
leave no trace on the land. Every 5 years or so, they have a fallow year. They literally skip the festival to let the grass regrow, because this is actually still a functioning dairy farm. They make cheddar cheese here.
I mean, let's get to that. I've been to a lot of music festivals, and I can see how much of a mess they make. How can hundreds of thousands of people camp for 5 days and leave no trace?
I mean, the organizers are just serious about sustainability. They're composting toilets. There's an army of volunteers who clear trash and sage for free tickets. The festival is plastic-free, glass-free. Here's Sarah Stevens. She's been volunteering here for the past 40 years.
Yeah, the cows are just missing at the moment. And that's why you have to respect the land even more. You know, no glass and no non-biodegradable glitter. And because what you drop, a cow will be eating in 3 weeks' time.
And it's not just music. There's art, magic, acrobats, political activism. Last year, this festival raised more than $2 million for 3 big charities: Greenpeace, WaterAid, and Oxfam.
That's NPR's Lauren Frayer at the Glastonbury Music Festival in Southwest England. Lauren, enjoy this hardship assignment.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hundreds of people gathered just outside Yellowstone National Park yesterday for a ceremony celebrating the birth of a rare white bison inside the park. Many Native Americans believe such a birth is both a blessing and a warning. Wyoming Public Radio's Hannah Merzbaum was there.
Near a dark blue lake outside Yellowstone National Park under cloudy skies, the crowd is silent as Lakota's spiritual leader, Arbo Looking Horse, takes the stage. He stands behind an altar of bison skulls and burning cedar and sage. Wearing a white, black feathered headdress with red beads, 7-year-old Looking Horse tells the crowd he didn't think he'd live to see this day. He says the birth of the white bison, which many indigenous people call a buffalo, is comparable to the second coming of Jesus Christ, and that when he first heard a white calf had been born, white bison are sometimes born in captivity to parents with pro DNA. Yellowstone staff have not confirmed the recent birth, but Looking Horse says this one, which has been photographed by tourists, is completely wild and fulfills the white buffalo calf woman prophecy. He says she came to the Lakota people millennia ago and taught them how to live peacefully together and pray. And she said next time she returns, Mike Valdez from the Northern Arapaho and Northern Ute tribes traveled about 5 hours from the Wind River Reservation for the ceremony. She says she feels a bit scared for the change the prophecy predicts, but
Following the lead of something that, we're not fully aware of and perspective we haven't known is really important to me.
Looking Horse says the prophecy speaks of an uptick in disasters like earthquakes, wildfires, and more viruses if we don't better protect the earth for the sake of buffalo. Yellowstone National Park is currently debating how large its bison herd should be allowed to grow. The ceremony ends in song. For NPR News, I'm Hannah Merzbach in West Yellowstone, Montana.
And in Houston, since 18 on all things considered on your station, News 87. 95 Fahrenheit, 35 Celsius right now here at the UH campus. Heat index 106 or 41. I'm David Pittman out on the freeway. Still have a problem on the South Loop westbound 610 coming away from 225. Process to clear the wreck there. Still blocking the right lane. And on the North Sam eastbound wreck at TC Jester has been cleared. You'll be slow coming away from 245.
In addition to bringing you News 88.7, Houston Public Media also broadcasts PBS to all of Greater Houston. Want to watch shows like All Creatures Great and Small, Grantchester, or Masterpiece? What about Broadway performances or Austin City Limits? Get exclusive streaming access to over 4,000 PBS shows and films with Houston PBS Passport. For as little as $5 a month, you can stream all these and more from the PBS video app. Go to houstonpublicmedia.org/passport.
Hollywood last summer was at something of a strike-induced standstill, which has meant fewer blockbusters this year, but there are signs of hope.
It's just not Barbenheimer-level awareness right now, but the world of good movie making is still alive and well. Like all ceratops, it has horns on its head, but these blades, they look like the ones on Loki's helmet. And 2, because its skull resides in Denmark.
So that's the first part of the name. What about the second part of the name?
Yeah, this is less fun, but still interesting. Like Rangiformes refers to horns not being symmetrical like caribou.
Huh, I didn't know caribou have asymmetrical horns.
Yeah, I had to look it up.
So, Ari, this is a brand new species of ceratops, or horned dinosaur, and it all starts with bones found on private land in northern Montana, which is actually in my neck of the woods. So this area is well known for a place with lots of fossils.
Turn left.
At first, researchers thought it was a known dinosaur called Medusaceratops.
So, it was pretty cool. We were actually gathered around a table, and, we're there together, and we had that eureka moment where, wow, this really is something new.
That's paleontologist Mark Lowen, and this discovery was published in the journal PeerJ last week.
Can I just say these names are very mythological? Like Medusa, Ceratops, Loki, Ceratops. I feel like we're tapping into Greek mythology in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Is this pretty typical?
Well, not all of them are named that, Ari. But it's a reasonable question.
But they're still cool because over the years, researchers have found 5 distinct ceratops there, which shows how diverse the horned dino population was and how they were rapidly evolving.
Mark and another co-author, Joseph Sertich, told me that where most dinosaur species live for around 2 million years, these fast-evolving ceratops species might only have existed for 200,000 years.
So among this new family of ceratops, what makes Loki ceratops different from the others?
Yeah, so generally ceratops have horns on the top of their skulls, this bony frill going backwards from its skull, and horns on their noses. These head features are thought to be used for attracting mates, but the Loki ceratops does not
independent journalism that makes sense of the news shaping the world. More at economist.com or with the Economist app, newsletters, and podcasts. And by Babbel for Business. With over 13,000 hours of language courses, Babbel is helping businesses break down language barriers and improve work-life safety. Learn more at babbelforbusiness.com.
In Los Angeles, I'm Con Brisbell. It is Thursday, today the 27th of June. Good as always, stab you along, everybody. 2 words as a way to get going today. Administrative state. And now, just for the heck of it, a handful of more words. Securities and Exchange Commission versus Jarkism. The logjam of pending decisions from the United States Supreme Court broke up a little bit more today, the last couple of days of their term, with of interest to us in particular a ruling in SEC versus Jarkism about the power of federal agencies to make policy and then, most importantly, enforce it. Blake Emerson is a professor of law and political science at UCLA. He's our go-to on matters of administrative law. Professor Emerson, good to have you back on the program.
Great to be here.
First blush, would you make this decision?
So, this opinion is of a piece with a number of cases that the Supreme Court has recently laid down that will significantly limit the powers of Congress to regulate the economy, to promote public health and public safety. And this opinion on the Securities and Exchange Commission's authority to impose penalties in its in-house courts furthers that overall project.
This is not just about the Securities and Exchange Commission. That's kind of important.
Yes, very much so. So the powers that the court said the SEC unconstitutionally exercised are powers that other agencies also hold. And if we look beyond the narrow ruling of the case about penalties to this broader question about the regulatory agency's powers to regulate private rights, like rights to property and contract, there's a much larger swath of agencies, like the National Labor Relations Board and the Federal Trade Commission, that could come under threat now that the court has made this significant change in law.
Am I going too far if I say that these regulatory agencies and the powers they exercise are how this economy works?
I think they're certainly central to the way in which the economy has operated, at least since the New Deal. The theory of the administrative state in the United States is that we want to have a free market economy, but there are many cases where the market doesn't function properly or where there are values other than maximizing profit that people in Congress want to recognize. So the Securities and Exchange Commission, for instance, was created in response to the Great Depression in order to counter widespread fraud and abuse in the sale and marketing of securities. And this opinion takes away one of the key tools in the arsenal that these kinds of agencies have to limit those kinds of abuses.
Does it then follow that there may be more financial fraud and abuse if the Securities and Exchange Commission doesn't have these powers?
Yes, well, in a very straightforward way, you can think of this kind of ruling as increasing the costs to agencies like the SEC of enforcing the law, and at the same time decreasing the cost for people who want to break the law of doing so, because this will make it harder for the SEC to enforce the various securities laws that Congress has given it responsibility to administer.
The phrase that comes to mind here, Professor, is chilling effect, right?
Absolutely, and that's consistent with a number of other rulings the Supreme Court has laid down that send a very strong signal both to other courts, to lower courts in the federal judiciary, as well as to Congress and to administrative agencies, that they are under very close scrutiny by the Supreme Court, and the court will look skeptically at their exercise of significant powers.
Well, so let's play this forward a little bit, because either tomorrow or Monday now, I understand, are going to be more decision days, and we've still got a case coming about the Chevron deference, or deference, depending on how you want to pronounce it, about whether we ought to defer to regulatory agencies in interpretation of law. What does today's decision in the body of work that you just cited lead you to believe about what might happen, with the understanding that trying to split what the court's going to do is a fool's errand?
That's right. It's always hard to make predictions, but I think it is very likely the court will either overrule or significantly limit what's called Chevron deference. And the courts are supposed to accept the
Go straight on.
executive agency's interpretation of the statute if it's reasonable. Agencies both have scientific and technical expertise that the courts lack, and they're also more democratically accountable than the courts because the president exercises a lot of control over the people who are in charge of agencies. The court has given, I'd say, a lot of notice that Chevron is on the chopping block, and so I expect to see that doctrine either overruled or severely limited.
Do you ever sit back? Here comes the free response question. Do you ever sit back as a guy whose job is to figure out administrative law and teach it to new lawyers? Do you ever sit back and wonder how the administrative state and how this economy runs became so vilified?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think what has happened is that we have really profound, not only legal but also political disagreements about the proper role of the federal government in regulating the economy, in trying to prevent unfair practices, and trying to avoid harmful pollution, things of that nature. And unfortunately, that has broken down along partisan lines. The Republican Party tends to be opposed to such measures, and the Democrats are broadly in favor of it. Another side to it that I would note is that Congress has not shown a lot of willingness or alacrity to get in the game and to write new statutes, to refine the powers of agencies. And so in the absence of that kind of legislative action, we see increasingly is more and more unilateral presidential action. And so today we're seeing the culmination of that process in what Justice Kagan has called, in another opinion, an existential threat to the administrative state.
Blake Emerson is professor of law and political science as well at UCLA. Professor Emerson, thanks for your time, sir. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, guy.
Wall Street today, traders at last check still playing, but the SEC
States discovering the city through food and hopefully opening a restaurant.
Not so bad, right? Not so bad. First, though, let's do the numbers. Dow Industrials up 36 points today, 10%, 39,164. The Nasdaq picked up 53 points, about 10%, 17,858. The S&P 500 pocketed 4 points, 10%, 54.
Go straight on.
Walgreens plans to close a significant portion of its U.S. stores over the next 3 years. The drugstore chain reported this morning earnings today and told investors the current pharmacy model is challenging for business. Walgreens plummeted to 22% today. Competitor CVS did 3 and Billings, Montana, and maybe soon, Richmond, Virginia.
Marketplace is supported by GitLab. More than 50% of the Fortune 100 rely on GitLab to develop, secure, and deploy software faster. More at gitlab.com. And by Amazon Business, helping provide a smarter, easier way to get the supplies businesses need to thrive. Amazon Business, your partner for smart business buying.
This final note on the way out today, I direct your attention to the concurrence by Justice Gorsuch in today's decision in Securities and Exchange Commission versus Jargazi that I was talking to Professor Emerson about at the top of the program. Everybody is entitled to a typo, I know, but this is the Supreme Court we're talking about. Here is Gorsuch's opening line in his concurrence. The court decides a single issue, whether the Security and Exchange Commission's use of in-house hearings to seek civil penalties violates the Seventh Amendment right to a jury trial. Securities and Exchange Commission, Mr. Justice. Securities. John Buckley, I know I'm mistaken. John Buckley, John Gordon, Noah Carr, Diane Parker, Amanda Peacher, and Stephanie Seek are the Marketplace editing staff. Amir Bibawi is the managing editor. I'm Kyle Rizdal. We will see you tomorrow.
This is 8 p.m. minute before 7 on the evening before Friday on your NPR station, News 88.7.
Hello, I'm Doug Lawson, South Region President of Common Spirit Health. Access to quality information is vital for healthy communities. That's why St. Luke's Health, part of Common Spirit, is a proud supporter of Houston Public Media.
One final check on the drive home finds a problem westbound 225 heading out on the LaPorte Freeway. A wreck blocking all main lanes of the 610 loop. They've got a detour set up there. Northbound 45 still with the wreck before 242. 20 to 25 minutes to make that drive from Woodlands Parkway, and southbound 45 stacked from Rankin for a wreck now cleared at the North San. 95 with a heat index of 106 right now here at the UH campus, and this weather update sponsored by Interfaith Ministries Refugee Services. Sunset at 8:26. We'll have an overnight low around 80 under partly cloudy skies. Tomorrow's sunrise at 6:23, and tomorrow all the way through Independence Day up to a 30% chance of afternoon showers and storms with highs in the mid-90s. Heat index values right around 105. This is your NPR station, KUHF Houston News 88.7 service of the University of Houston at 7 o'clock.
We know that 11 of the Chinese swimmers who tested positive for TMZ will be going
justices invalidated a multi-billion-dollar opioid settlement. They put on hold an important EPA rule aimed at reducing ozone pollution. They temporarily allowed emergency abortions in Idaho in cases where the woman's health, but not her life, is in grave jeopardy. And finally, the conservative supermajority continued its march to curtail agency power, ruling that Congress exceeded its powers when it authorized the Securities and Exchange Commission to impose fines on financial wrongdoers. There'll be more decisions tomorrow and next week. Nina Tuckberg, NPR News, Washington.
The U.S. Embassy in Lebanon is warning Americans to strongly reconsider travel to the country. NPR's Jackie Northam explains the move comes amid growing tension between Israel and Iran-backed Hezbollah militants in southern Lebanon.
The brief travel advisory by the U.S. Embassy in Beirut says the security environment in Lebanon remains complex and can change quickly. It urged U.S. citizens not to travel to southern Lebanon, the Lebanon-Syria border region, or to refugee settlements. Israel and Hezbollah have exchanged almost daily cross-border fire since October 7th, when Hamas militants launched an attack on Israel. The U.S. has been trying to ensure that fighting in the north doesn't erupt into a broader regional conflict. Some foreign governments, such as Canada, Germany, and the Netherlands, have urged their citizens to leave Lebanon. Jackie Northam, NPR News.
The U.S. economy was still growing during the first 3 months of this year, though at a far slower pace than the final quarter of last year. The government made a slight upgrade from its previous forecast, says the economy expanded at 1.4% annual rate during the January through March report. Stocks closed virtually unchanged, even down 36 points. This is at BR. Legendary Texas iconoclast musician and writer Kiki Friedman has died. He was 79 years old. This is Public Radio's Jack Morgan with his remembrance.
After graduating from the University of Texas, Kiki Friedman joined the Peace Corps, became a musician, novelist, and even went for governor. Come to the circus. Come to the circus. Come to the circus of life. In 2018, Friedman told me his inspiration for his Circus of Life album.
What do you call him? My psychologist, Louis Nelson. He says, what do you got, King? And I said, I'm watching Matlock. He said, turn Matlock on and start writing. For the first time in 40 years, I started writing songs. Wrote a dozen of them in 1 month.
Kiki Friedman's health had been failing the last couple of years, and he died on his Echo Hill Ranch, northwest of Medina. I'm Jack Morgan in San Antonio.
Oklahoma's top education official says in a memo he wants public schools to incorporate the Bible lessons in grades 5 through 12. Superintendent Brian Walters was elected in 2022, saying he expects, quote, immediate and strict compliance. The move drew immediate criticism from civil rights groups who called it unconstitutional and an abuse of power. Crude oil futures prices closed higher today on continued concerns about possible supply disruptions due to ongoing tensions in the Mideast. It was up 84 cents a barrel to settle at 81.74 a barrel in New York. I'm Jack Spear, NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Capital One, offering their travel card, Venture, What's in Your Wallet, Terms Apply, details at CapitalOne.com, and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation at rwjf.org.
From the New York Times, I'm Natalie Kintroa. This is The Daily.
Tell me about what happened.
My name is Michael Phelps, and I come from
Michael Phelps, the most well-known swimmer probably in American history.
As we approach the 2024 Olympic Games.
And Allison Schmidt, one of the most accomplished female swimmers in American history, went up to Capitol Hill to essentially say they had lost complete faith in the system that is supposed to ensure that there's a level playing field when you sit down and watch Olympic athletes compete. And they started their argument by telling the story of what it's been like to be them.
Now, there are times where I would be blood and urine tested twice a day. They can be within a 30-minute window. We're taking 4 to 6 vials of blood every time they test.
To be Olympic athletes who gave basically all of their privacy over to a drug testing system.
From filling out forms to update our whereabouts every hour of the day.
Where their whereabouts was always known so a drug tester could find them.
Us pulling our pants down below our knees, pulling our shirts up to our breasts, and having them watch the pee come out.
And where it was so invasive that they had to urinate directly in front of a tester.
I knew at 17 years old, 16 years old, that I was signing my privacy and my rights away for fair sport and clean sport.
They're basically saying, look, in the hopes and dreams of there being fair sport, they would play by the rules and wouldn't use drugs they weren't supposed to, but would also essentially open their lives up to drug testers.
And Mike, if I understand it correctly, part of the reason they're so enraged is that they say this isn't happening everywhere. Other countries aren't doing this.
They're saying the more that we learn about how this system works around the world, the more that we learn that not everyone is being held to the standard that we were held to.
In 2016, I had over 150 drug tests during that year. There were other delegations as a whole that were having 30, 40.
Because of that, how can we trust anything that we see that goes on at the Olympics?
Okay, so why now? Why are they coming to Congress and saying this right now?
These decorated swimmers were up on Capitol Hill because of a story my colleague Tarek Panja and I wrote 2 months ago. The story begins at the height of the pandemic. It was early 2021. The Summer Olympics were just a couple of months away, and the Chinese Swimming Association wanted to hold a meet to essentially allow their swimmers who had been training in seclusion to practice competition. So all of the elite Chinese swimmers congregated in the same city, south of Beijing, and there, over several days, they swam against each other. The swimmers, like they normally are at major meets, were being drug tested. But what no one knew was that 23 out of the 39 athletes who were tested showed that they all had the same performance-enhancing drug in their system. It's a staggering number, and it's all for the same drug. A drug called trimetazidine. It's known as TMZ. It's a prescription heart medication used to treat people that have chest pains, that have angina. It's supposed to make the heart work more efficiently and allow those with heart disease to exert themselves in ways that they're often unable to. This drug is popular amongst dopers for several reasons. It allows you to train harder. And if you train harder, that means that you will be in better shape and more capable when you finally get to a competition. It's also attractive because it substances that can help an athlete. If you have any amount of it in your system, you're potentially on the hook for a 4-year ban. So for the Chinese, this was a nightmare scenario. It's just months before the Summer Olympics, and you're looking at the possibility of essentially half of your swimming team not being able to go to the games because they were doping.
Okay, so what happens? What do they do?
So the Chinese engaged in a wide-scale investigation and scientific research effort to explain what happened. And we know this because we've obtained a lengthy secret Chinese document that lays out how they investigated the positive tests. And they said that a couple of months after the athletes tested positive, investigators found trace amounts of TMZ in the kitchen of a hotel where the athletes were fed. They say that this prescription heart drug was found in spice containers, in the hood over the grill, and in the drainage. But what the Chinese are unable to explain is how the drug got into the kitchen and why it was there.
It sounds like there's a lot that is unexplained in all of this. I mean, the entire theory seems a little questionable.
There are drugs that sometimes end up in food because they're given to cows and athletes eat the cows and it's in their system. TMZ is not one of those drugs. This is a prescription heart medication.
Go straight on.
And the Chinese are unable to explain why a prescription heart medication ended up in a kitchen or how the athletes ingested it. And under the code that is supposed to govern Olympic athletes, you can have what are called essentially no-fault contaminations, in which an athlete is not penalized for testing positive for a drug. But to do that, you essentially need to prove exactly how it happened. And the Chinese explanation, according to anti-doping experts who looked at this and studied it, doesn't rise to that level.
Okay, so what do they do in this case?
In this case, the World Anti-Doping Agency essentially comes in, looks at the Chinese explanation, and accepts the rationale that these athletes were contaminated with this prescription heart drug. And without anyone knowing, these swimmers who tested positive head to the 2021 Olympics and have some of the greatest success in Chinese swimming history. A male swimmer who had tested positive for TMZ becomes the second man in Chinese history to win a gold in swimming. A female swimmer who had tested positive won 2 gold medals and 1 silver. And the most dramatic example comes in the women's 4x200 relay race.
China, up for the challenge.
2 of the 4 swimmers from the Chinese team had tested positive for TMZ. that was supposed to ensure that athletes were all
Turn
competing on the same playing field, was that functioning? Was this a race in which athletes were showing their natural abilities, or that something else was at play?
Turn right.
We'll be right back.
The Daily is supported by BetterHelp, committed to supporting mental health through therapy. Clients are matched with one of 35,000 therapists and can communicate via video, chat, or phone at betterhelp.com/public. Climate change is dire, but it does not have to be world-ending. Even though they can feel removed from our daily lives, the solutions are out there. Tune in to the latest season of How We Survive from Marketplace, wherever you get your podcasts. For everything you need to know about the most important stories of the day, you're listening to The Daily, distributed by American Public Media.
This is News 88.7.
Some things in life are difficult, but making a difference in our community shouldn't be. Why not take your old or unused vehicle and donate it to Houston Public Media? Take something you're not using and turn it into something you can't get enough of. We'll handle the paperwork, provide free contactless pickup of your car, and issue you a tax receipt. If it's not in the best condition, don't worry about it. We'll take it. Call 877-252-0436 or donate online at houstonpublicmedia.org/vehicles.
Hi, I'm Craig Cohen. On Houston Matters, we keep you connected and informed by exploring the issues, stories, and perspectives that make Houston unique. And it's all supported by listeners like you. Make a gift right now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
Support comes from the UT Health Houston Mood Center, accepting patients with treatment-resistant depression for the global clinical trial of psilocybin. Study information at go.uth.edu/compass.
Mike Schmidt on a new doping scandal rocking the world of Olympic swimming. Mike, let's talk about that larger system that failed to expose these positive tests by Chinese swimmers that kept these tests hidden. It sounds like one potential issue is that the system relies on self-policing, but there are these perverse incentives, right, for many countries to not actually root out doping when they find it because, I mean, number one, they want to win medals, and number two, they don't want to damage the reputation of their athletes.
Get ready to turn
Why does
left.
the system work this way?
One of the reasons that it was set up this way
Turn
is
left,
that it was just
and
too
then turn
logistically
left.
hard to have the World Anti-Doping Agency, also known as WADA, trying to track thousands and thousands of Olympic athletes around the world. They needed the countries to be able to administer the testing and to prosecute the cases. And WADA was supposed to make sure that those countries were doing their job, that they were holding their athletes accountable, and they had the power to step in. And in those cases in which they said, hey, this doesn't look right, more needs to be done, they could come in and prosecute the cases. But what happens here is that when WADA finds out about this, and they get this explanation from the Chinese, they essentially take it at face value. But when WADA's credibility comes into question, the whole system comes into question. And that's the point that Phelps and Beijing, games that they were trying to pull off at the height of a
Turn right.
pandemic in a country that was shut down. And other theories have been that the Olympic movement doesn't really want to go out and tarnish their own sports and put out there the notion that these games may not be being played on a level playing field.
But Mike, doesn't it tarnish the sport more to find evidence of doping and not report it?
Not if you're able to keep it secret. Because if, in the lead up to an Olympics, you had to suspend half of a country's swimming team so they couldn't compete, that would cast a really dark cloud over the games. And at the end of the day, there's an enormous amount of money on the line here. And do you want to tarnish that product? Do you want to undermine it in the eyes of fans and raise the question, oh gosh, is this really a level playing field?
And the only reason we know about this case is because of reporting, which makes me wonder whether you think there may be other examples of this that we haven't yet heard about.
Look, I don't know what I don't know, but the problem is that when we learn about things like this, it calls everything else into question.
After all your reporting, Mike, I have to ask if you actually think that we can trust what we see in the Olympics next month, that we're going to be watching the best athletes from all over the world who train for years for this, put their bodies to the test and achieve these miraculous feats based not on drugs, but on their merit.
Well, we know that 11 of the Chinese swimmers who tested positive for TMZ will be going to this Olympics in Paris to compete. They have faced no consequence and will be in the water swimming against American swimmers who have, been subject to this rigorous drug testing program. But I've wondered about this question too, right? What should we think when we tune into the Olympics? Should we look at it and sort of just kind of let it go and enjoy it for what it is, or should we look at it more skeptically? I don't really know the answer. So what I did was I went to the chief broadcaster of the Olympics, NBC, and I asked them essentially that same question. Are you confident that you'll be broadcasting an Olympics in which the athletes will be competing on a level playing field? And NBC acknowledged receiving the email, and they never got back to me. And in all of this, it was a bit telling that the chief broadcaster of the Olympics couldn't answer the basic question about whether fans could trust what they're going to be seeing.
Mike, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Mike Schmidt is an investigative reporter for the New York Times.
The Daily is supported by the Wall Street Journal. From the boardroom table to what's on the kitchen table.
Okay,
it's your
let's find a new
business.
route.
And by Total Wine & More, helping shoppers love what they find at TotalWine.com. Spirits not sold in Virginia or North Carolina. Drink responsibly, B21. Rigorous reporting told through a human lens. Go deeper into the most important stories of the day with The Daily, an audio series from the New York Times.
The Daily is powered by the journalism of the New York Times and is distributed by APM, American Public Media. You can go deeper into the stories you hear on The Daily at nytimes.com/The Daily. That's it for The Daily. I'm Natalie Kitchowak. See you tomorrow.
Support comes from MD Anderson Cancer Center, where a single blood donation at MD Anderson Cancer Center can help make a life-saving difference for cancer patients. Information on donating blood blood, appointments, and more at mdandersongiveblood.com.
A college coach moves from one rival to another, while a hot dog eating champion banned from one July 4th competition heads to another. It's all happening in Texas, of course. I'm Craig Cohen. We discuss on this week's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly on the next Houston Matters.
Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.
There's something very strange happening on the world's largest music streaming service. People around the world say they are experiencing the same phenomenon. They play a song, any song, a random song, but when that song is finished, a new song plays. But it's always the same song. Your playlist finishes, there's that song. Espresso. That album finishes, there's that song. Espresso. Espresso finishes. There it is again. Espresso. The espresso conspiracy theory is brewing on Today Explained.
Go straight on.
Live from NPR News in Culver City, California, I'm Dwayne Brown. Well, for the first time in 4 years, President Biden and his Republican rival Donald Trump are set to meet on the debate stage in about half an hour. 81-year-old Democratic incumbent has the opportunity to reassure voters he's capable of guiding the country through a second term, while 78-year-old Trump could use the moment to move past his recent felony conviction. PR's Winter Johnston has more.
With recent polling showing an extremely tight rematch, the stakes are high for each candidate as he makes his case for a second term. It's yet to be seen whether this debate will change the trajectory of the race, but it gives Trump and Biden the opportunity to address the most pressing issues, including abortion rights, immigration, and inflation. Voters will not only be listening for what the candidates say, but how they interact with each other and whether either of them can move the needle among undecided voters.
NPR will be providing live special coverage of tonight's debate, which begins shortly at 9 Eastern. In New Mexico, the risk of flash flooding around wildfire burn areas remains high through the weekend. NPR's Kurt Sigler tells us most businesses are closed in Las Vegas, New Mexico, due to a water crisis.
This city of 13,000 people is believed to be within a day or two of running out of drinking water. After days of relying on donations, FEMA just sent 8 semi-truckloads of pallets of water. Lieutenant Colonel Megan Napier of the New Mexico National Guard says now they're able to distribute water for 8 hours a day instead of just limited windows. The need is extreme.
We are able to service people who are working during the day and unable to come during the early morning hours to get in line. So we're not having to turn people away today, and that's a pretty good feeling.
Mudslides coming off a wildfire burn scar from 2 years ago rendered the city's water treatment plant all but inoperable.
You're listening to NPR News. In Kentucky, plaintiffs challenging abortion restrictions are using a move often employed by conservative groups to argue their case, religious freedom. From Kentucky Public Radio, Sylvia Goodman has more.
The Kentucky women filed their suit more than a year and a half ago as part of a wave of lawsuits saying state abortion restrictions are a violation of religious freedom. Plaintiff Lisa Sobel argues that Kentucky's ban not only endangers her health, but her ability to practice her religion.
As much as I'd like to go forward and try to have more children, I can't in good conscience because there's too much risk to my life and to what I may or may not be charged with.
The lawsuit revolves in part around in vitro fertilization. The women say Kentucky's laws aren't clear on whether embryos, whether they're viable or not, can be discarded in the IVF process. For NPR News, I'm Sylvia Goodman in Louisville.
In Atlanta, the hotel company Red Roof Inn has agreed to a major undisclosed settlement in a sex trafficking case involving 11 alleged victims. This after the hotel chain and some of its employees knowingly profited from sex trafficking at 2 hotels near Atlanta over a 10-year period. Landmark settlement resolves allegations from women who said they were exploited for years at the Red Roof hotels. On Wall Street, stocks finished modestly higher today, the Dow gained 36 points. This is NPR.
In addition to bringing you News 88.7, Houston Public Media also broadcasts PBS to all of Greater Houston. Want to watch shows like All Creatures Great and Small, stream all these and more from the PDS video app. Go to houstonpublicmedia.org/passport.
On last week's Wait Wait, Adam Felber was a little skeptical of the Surgeon General putting a warning label on social media.
It doesn't help that I learned about this warning on Twitter.
Peter Sagal, be aware that listening to this week's show live from the Mann Theater in Philadelphia with jazz master Christian McBride may cause light chuckling in public. That's Wait Wait from NPR.
Saturday and Sunday mornings at 10 o'clock, right here on News 88 XM. Tell your smart speaker to play Houston Public Media.
Rebecca Jennings, senior correspondent at Vox. We've asked you here to explain a phenomenon on Spotify. Now, I'm going to confess that on my Spotify, I'm very particular about never letting Spotify ever play any music for me.
Oh, wow.
I want to listen to the music I've already predetermined that I want to listen to. Now,
This is some control tendencies happening
sure,
here.
I'm very particular. I am my own DJ. However, I know that I may be in the minority. How are other people, maybe even you, experiencing music recommendation on Spotify right now?
So there has been a lot of online chatter over the past 2 or so months where people were saying, why does this song play after every single song that I play, regardless of what it is?
Can espresso please stop coming up after every single thing I listen to? Is this happening to anybody else?
Every single time on Spotify something I was listening to ended, it would start playing Espresso by Sabrina Carpenter.
It's just espresso, espresso, espresso.
And it's not Sabrina Carpenter, the artist. It's not a genre. It's just this one song.
It's just this one song. It came out in April, and just like it really, really was just everywhere. No matter what song you played, it was just like you heard those first few bars of espresso, and you're like, oh, it's this again.
And people's gut reaction to this song popping up over and over and over again is that there's some sort of untoward payola-esque conspiracy on Spotify right now?
On Twitter and TikTok, people are sort of saying their theories about what they think is going on.
I've seen lots of comments about how Espresso by Sabrina Carpenter got to #1 on the global Spotify charts, basically because of payola.
It's really suspicious. Like, is the payola going on?
Some people call it Spotify-ola. I just say it's payola, but for Spotify. But, I mean, that's definitely what's happening.
They're like, the labels in Spotify are, they're all coming together to force feed us espresso down our throats. Which is a metaphor that works in 2 ways.
For people who aren't from like 1947, can you remind them what payola is?
Absolutely. So payola is a practice that is illegal, and it refers to when labels would pay radio DJs to play certain songs without disclosing it.
Take the money. We're going to make this one a hit.
Payola, crucially, it refers only to the public airwaves on TV and radio. And so even if there is pay-for-play happening with Spotify, it's technically not payola because the internet does not apply.
So that's not what's going on. Another theory I see is that Sabrina Carpenter is a so-called industry plant.
Sure.
What exactly would that entail?
So an industry plant is sort of this like vague term that people love to use on the internet when they suddenly start seeing an artist everywhere and they're like, where did you come from? Which is kind of funny because Sabrina Carpenter has actually she was like a Disney Channel star like 10 years ago.
Hey, I'm Sabrina Carpenter from Girl Meets World, and you're watching Disney Channel.
So she actually has been around for a long time, and like if you want to say that the whole like Disney machine is a little bit weird and corrupt or whatever, it's like sure, I hear you, but like industry plant, that is fact.
Disney star.
It sounds like she was literally planted by an industry 10 years ago, and that industry is Disney.
No, exactly.
basically one of its underlying principles is this idea called collaborative filtering, where like, you know, if you're kind of a standard like pop music listener, it will take songs that other pop listeners are really liking and adding to their playlist and engaging with or whatever, and serve them to you.
But why does it feel to people like it's just one song?
I think it's like this concept that happens a lot in these recommendation algorithms, which is like snowballing. I think people are really familiar with it on TikTok, where it's like, you know, TikTok will like serve people a video, and if those people like that video, it will serve it to more people and more and more and more until it becomes like inescapable for a certain group of users. And Spotify's we can kind of safely say it works similarly. But because I think there is so much distrust within the music industry, and for good reason, because it's natural that people are like, well, you know, something else is going on rather than just sort of like algorithmic snowballing.
What has Spotify said specifically about Sabrina? What have they said about this song, Espresso? Because clearly there's this clamoring online for some reason.
Yeah. So I reached out to Spotify for a comment. They wouldn't comment on the record, but they did send me, of course, they did send me 2 Instagram posts that they had published about the rise of Sabrina Carpenter, and they made it very clear that, you know, this is just an occasion where, you know, the stars kind of aligned with her career in general. She kind of did the standard like pop girly thing.
I'm on SNL and you're not.
And that coincided with the amount of plays of Espresso on the platform. But like, because, you know, this many plays are happening on Spotify, like how much of those were just like auto plays that Spotify sort of like pushed onto people versus people searching for Espresso? It's like, that's sort of the gray area of like, well, how much is the platform kind of boosting this person's career versus like other forces?
So there's a bit of a black hole on how exactly all of this works. Maybe it's a huge black hole, but do we know if there is a legitimate way to pay for extra plays on Spotify?
So there actually is. Spotify has this thing called Discovery Mode, where artists can forfeit about 30% of their streaming royalties in an effort for Spotify to push their songs to more listeners. And this is obviously very controversial, as you can imagine. 3 members of Congress have signed a letter to Spotify saying either you need to release a list of every single artist that's enrolled in the program, and also saying that, as far as we know, the artists who are using it and the artists that Spotify publicly has, you know, said are using it are independent artists. They're not associated with major labels. They're basically doing this to compete with the major labels, which in the letter the Congress people said, you know, that sort of creates this sort of like race to the bottom, where the artists who are already like up and coming and they're less privileged than those signed to major labels, like they're forfeiting even more of their profits in an effort to just compete on the same playing field. It does feel sort of like, you know, a little like pay to play, because it kind of is, but you're not paying anything, you're just like forfeiting potential streaming profits. Deals with labels and recording artists are confidential. Like, we don't know what's in them, and so, you know, there could theoretically be stuff where like Spotify is required to play this song like XYZ times. I don't know.
If that were one day revealed that Spotify was making deals with record labels to boost their artists, would Spotify be breaking any rules, or would it just be sort of deceiving its listeners, its users?
So I talked to 2 academics who study this, and one said that obviously, like, you know, it's not a payola law because, again, it doesn't apply, but I think, you know, in the future, the Federal Trade Commission could theoretically count this as an example of, you know, undisclosed advertisements. And so the same law that, you know, requires influencers to say like, hey, like this brand paid for me to stay at this hotel, or they're paying for me to post this. There is a world in which theoretically Spotify could, you know, be forced to say like, hey, the reason you're hearing this is because we're getting a deal from this.
I have to imagine it's pretty low on the list of federal priorities, though. Why is Espresso playing more often than Vampire Weekend?
I mean, maybe there's someone at the FTC being like, I can't escape Espresso, we need to do an investigation.
I hope so.
Member of the FTC.
Rebecca Jennings, Vox.com. So just to summarize here, Sabrina Carpenter isn't an industry plant, or at least she's not a particularly new one. Spotify is recommending her a lot, but probably just because they think you'll like her, not because she's paying them to do so, probably. But if you're looking for a reason to be mad at Spotify, we might have one when we're back on Today Explained.
Today Explained is supported by BetterHelp, committed to helping clients with issues ranging from relationship challenges and goal setting to grief and depression. Learn more at betterhelp.com/public.
This is News 88.7.
Hi, I'm Camille Nelson, your member relations specialist. If you are a monthly Always member and need to update your donation payment method, you can go online to houstonpublicmedia.org/update. Our easy online form will ensure that your information remains secure. Also, consider making the switch to EFT. You will help lower our processing cost, which puts more funding into the programming you love, trust, and rely on. Thank you.
I'm Jeremy Hobson. Next time on The Middle, we're coming to you live right after the Trump-Biden debate.
Donald Trump lost 2 debates to me in 2020. Since then, he hadn't shown up for debate. Now he's acting like he wants to debate me again. Well, make my day, pal.
Can't talk, he can't walk, can't find his way off the stage, can't put 2 sentences together, although he has agreed to debate.
Your calls after the debate, next time on The Middle.
That's going to be later tonight at 10 o'clock here on News 88.7.
Today Explained co-host Sean Rameswaram back at it. Sounds like you can't really be too mad that Spotify thinks you might like another and another and another shot of espresso. But if you want to be mad at Spotify, you can always be mad about how little they pay songwriters. David Israelite certainly is. He's in the middle of leading a fight against the streaming platform because he's the president and CEO of the National Music Publishers Association, or as its friends know it, the NMPA,
which is the trade association that represents all music publishers and their songwriter partners in the United States.
Okay. And right now, you are mad at Spotify. Tell me why.
Well, it's not so much that I am mad at Spotify, it's that Spotify has declared war on all of the songwriters that have made their business even possible. And so as a representative of those songwriters and music publishers, sure, I'm mad, but more importantly, I'm motivated to try to fix what is the problem, which is Spotify trying to cheat these songwriters out of the royalties that they deserve.
Now, I'm sure a lot of Spotify users out there will be surprised to hear that Spotify has declared war on songwriters because they're just listening to Espresso or whatever and had no idea. So tell people what exactly you mean and how Spotify has maybe declared war, because they certainly haven't used those words.
So if you're one of the 44 million Americans who subscribe to Spotify, what they've done is change the nature of your subscription to make you what is called a bundled customer. And what a bundle means is when you take a music product and you marry it with another product that's not music related. In this case, a audiobooks product. And then you try to tell the consumer that you're getting both for a higher price. That is something that Spotify has done without the permission or the consent of these 44 million Americans. And so if you go back to November of last year, for these 44 million subscribers that signed up for a music plan, all of a sudden, without any notice, you saw a little button in your subscription that said audiobooks, and it gave you for free 15 hours of listening to books a month.
Okay.
So then fast forward to March 1st of this year, and Spotify very quietly rolled out a product that said, if you want to just buy audiobooks for $9.99 a month, you can sign up for just an audiobook product. And I suspect very few people have done that. In fact, if you try to even find it, they make it very difficult to even find. And the significance of them doing that is that what they now claimed is that for those 44 million subscribers that they had been giving audiobooks to for free since November of last year, that now made them a bundled customer. And so for those 44 million customers, a couple of things happened. First of all, under the law, if you are a that said that songwriters and music publishers have to license their copyrights and the government will set a price.
Copyright Act of 1909. Any other person may make similar use of the copyrighted work upon the payment to the copyright proprietor of a royalty of 2 cents.
That law from 1909, fast forward to today, says that there are 3 judges in Washington, D.C. They're called the Copyright Royalty Board. Wow. And every 5 years there's a trial. And on one side of the courtroom is my organization representing songwriters and publishers. And on the other side of the courtroom are the companies that do digital music like Spotify, Apple, Amazon, YouTube, Pandora. And at the end of that trial, the court issues a decision, and those are the rates and the rules that govern us for 5 years at a time. This court decided to impose upon the industry the idea that if you bundle a product, you pay under a different scheme. They were not anticipating something like this. They were anticipating a real bundle, where you take a music product that you can buy alone, you take a non-music product you can buy alone, and you marry them together for a discount. That's what the court intended. What Spotify is doing is trying to manufacture a bundle that a customer did not choose. As the trade association that represents all these songwriters and music publishers, we have filed a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission, or the FTC, because we believe what Spotify is doing involves a fraudulent and deceptive business practice that is prohibited by law.
Turn right.
We also have referred that FTC complaint to 10 different state attorneys general, and furthermore, we have sent this to 6 leading consumer advocacy organizations to also investigate whether or not what Spotify is doing involves a fraudulent and deceptive business practice. In addition to those 3 things, NMPA has also asked Congress to take a look at changing the law that makes us license and give music publishers and songwriters more freedom to make their own decisions about whether or not they want to be in business with a company that treats them like this.
You know, Dave, you explained to us how songwriters get paid, that it goes back to player pianos and this high council copyright royalty board, these 3 judges in DC. It sounds sort of like something out of a fantasy novel. Is that part of the reason Spotify can maneuver in this way? Because there's this small, unknowable government outfit that is determining how royalties work in the United States. Would it be different if songwriters got to choose how much they license their music to Spotify for themselves?
It's a great question, and I just want to be very clear. Record labels that represent recording artists are in a free market. They're not regulated by this law, and Spotify is not doing this to them. That's because if you're a record label, you can actually say no to Spotify, and therefore Spotify has to treat them like business partners. But for songwriters and music publishers, the law makes us license our songs whether we want to or not.
Ready to turn left.
I think Spotify is counting on 2 things. They're counting on ignorance from their customers, and they're counting on human nature is not going to go through the exercise of going through a bunch of steps to get back to where you started. And what I mean by that is that Spotify has now come out and said that they are going to offer a music-only alternative. But they're going to make these 44 million customers who are automatically shifted into a different plan have to elect to quit their current plan and sign up for a new one just to get back to where they were. And I think Spotify is counting on not many people will do that.
You know, Spotify would be nothing were it not for the songwriters' work that they bring to people. And that being said, I can only really think of 1 or 2 songwriters in the history of this platform that have really taken a strong stand against it. Neil Young and subsequently Joni Mitchell. Do you think artists
Spotify are now the number one source of income for the music industry. And Spotify is the largest of them. So in order to take a stand for a high-profile artist, you're asking them to give up their number one revenue source to make a stand, and on behalf of songwriters, which sometimes those artists are also songwriters, but sometimes they're not. It's a very difficult thing to ask anyone to do, is to hurt your own economic interest to stand up for others. I think you might start seeing
straight
more,
on.
but it's a very difficult thing to do.
David Israelite, President and CEO of the National Music Publishers Association, the NMPA for short. We reached out to Spotify to hear what the company had to say, and they were like,
I'm working late, 'cause I'm a sinner.
No, they actually had a lot to say, including that they notify users of any changes to their service, and they certainly notified everyone about this one. Spotify said they think that bundles like the one we spoke about with David attract more customers to pay for subscriptions, which means more people pay for music overall, and they reminded us that Spotify is on track to pay publishers more this year than last. Our program today was produced by Peter Baunon Rosen. We were edited through the grace of Matthew Collette, fact-checked and openly mocked by Laura Bullard, mixed and mastered by Rob Byers and Andrea Christensdottir. It's Today Explained.
Pinky Friedman was one of a kind, a humorous musician and author. And he also ran for office. A look at his life and legacy, plus the top news during a busy week, including the presidential debate and latest from the Supreme Court. All that and more on the next Texas Standard.
That's going to be tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock here on News 88.7. Be sure to tell your smart speaker to play Houston Public Media.
Houston Public Media helps nonprofits tell their stories through Community Catalyst. Learn about the needs in our community through data from Understanding Houston and meet Houston area nonprofits making a difference at HoustonCommunityCatalyst.org.
Hello Houston is a daily newsletter for the busy person on the go, delivered to your inbox every morning with a quick recap of the previous day and a look ahead at the current day's news. Sign up today at HoustonPublicMedia.org/Hello Houston.
Well, there's going to be a 20% chance of showers and thunderstorms tonight. Partly cloudy with a low around 80 degrees and a southwest wind 5 to 10 miles per hour. Tomorrow, Friday, a 30% chance of rain at the middle of the afternoon. Mostly sunny, however, with a high near 95 degrees and a heat index value of 107. South wind 5 to 10 miles per hour. This is your NPR station, KUHF Houston News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston. It's 8 o'clock.
This is live special coverage of the CNN presidential debate simulcast on NPR News. I'm Steve Inskeep. In a moment, President Biden and former President Trump will walk onto a debate stage in Atlanta, Georgia. We will bring it to you live, all 90 minutes, and our NPR News colleagues are gathering here in Studio 32 in Washington, also in Atlanta and elsewhere to give analysis and fact-checking as soon as this debate is over. The candidates will be in a CNN TV studio. We've seen images. Unsurprisingly, the decor includes a lot of red, white, and blue panels, along with black floors and walls. Honestly, the black spaces make it feel a little understated. There is no crowd, no studio audience to laugh or boo or applaud. They leave that to you. The candidates will stand at lecterns 8 feet apart, and moderators Dana Bash and Jake Tapper will put questions to them under strict time limits. When a candidate is not supposed to be talking, his microphone is supposed to be off, a detail that my kids found amusing when I explained it to them earlier this evening. The campaigns agreed to all these rules in a debate hosted by CNN after President Biden's camp announced that he would not take part in the customary fall debates hosted by an independent commission. Now, as we head into this debate, national polls show the two candidates tied. President Biden has been gaining a little in polling averages. A few days ago, the 538 average of polls showed Biden ahead for the first time this year by 0.3 of 1 percentage point. Today, Trump is back ahead by 0.2 percentage point. I mean, they are tied. Let's think about some of the issues we expect to hear from tonight. We have been previewing them on NPR News. The economy is huge for most voters. Immigration is a big issue for many. Abortion is a big issue and one that the Biden camp wants to push tonight. America's role in the world is one in which each candidate has a different story to tell about what America has been doing and what they expect of America in the time to come. This is the earliest debate in general election presidential campaign history, June 27th. We are months out from the official election day in November, and it's a sign that there is now an early election season. Oregon is sending out ballots in late summer. People will be voting in September, and now the candidates are walking in. There's President Biden giving a wave as he steps to the stage and stepping up to the lectern, and we're watching to see former President Trump make his entrance shortly to this CNN studio in Atlanta.
The 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump.
Biden walked in slowly, waving a hand, and now President Trump, former President Trump, moving in quite slowly, taking his place at the lectern. They do not shake hands. Biden in a blue tie, Trump in red.
Let's begin the debate, and let's start with the issue that voters consistently say is their top concern, the economy. President Biden, inflation has slowed, but prices remain high. Since you took office, the price of essentials has increased. For example, a basket of groceries that cost $100 then now costs more than $120. And typical home prices have jumped more than 30%. What do you say to voters who feel they are worse off under your presidency than they were under President Trump?
We have to take a look at what I was there for. Became president. Mr. Trump, we had an economy that was fruitful. The pandemic was so badly handled. Many people were dying. All he said was it's not that serious. Just inject a little bleach in the economy collapsed. No jobs. Unemployment rate rose to 15%. It was terrible. And so what we had to do was try to put things back together. That's exactly what we had to do. We created 15,000 new jobs, and we brought out a position where we have 800,000 new manufacturing jobs, but there's more to be done.
Go straight on.
Class people are still in trouble. I come from Scranton, Pennsylvania. I come from households where the kitchen tables, things running, the price of eggs, the price of gas, the price of housing, the price of a whole range of things. That's why I'm working so hard to make sure I deal with those problems. That we're going to make sure that we reduce the price of housing. We're going to make sure we build 2 million new units. We're going to make sure we cap rents so corporate greed can't take over. The combination that was left with the corporate greed is the reason why we're in this problem right now. In addition to that, we're in a situation where if you take a look at all that was done in this administration, he didn't do much at all. By the time he left, things were in chaos. Chaos. And so we put things back together. We created, I said, those jobs. We make sure we had a situation where we brought down the price of prescription drugs, which is a major issue for many people. If they're $15 for an insulin shot as opposed to $400. No senior has to pay more than $200 for any drug, all the drugs they will be getting next year. The situation is we're going to make that available to everybody, to all Americans. So we're working to bring down the price on the kitchen table.
Go straight on.
That's what we're going to do.
Thank you, President Trump.
We have the greatest economy in the history of our country. We have never done so well. Everybody was amazed by it. Other countries were copying us. We got hit with COVID.
And then turn left.
When we did, we spent the money necessary so we wouldn't end up in
Turn
Great
left.
Depression, the likes of which we had in 1929. By the time we finished, we did a great job. We got a lot of credit for the economy, a lot of credit for the military, and no wars, and so many other things. Everything was rocking good. But the thing we never got the credit for, and we should have, is getting us out of that COVID mess. He created mandates that was a disaster for our country, but other than that, we had given them back a country where the stock market actually was higher than pre-COVID, and nobody thought that was even possible. The only jobs he created are for illegal immigrants and bounce-back jobs, the bounce-back from the COVID. He has not done a good job. He's done a poor job, and inflation's killing our country. It is absolutely killing us.
Thank you, President Biden.
Well, look, the greatest economy in the world, he's the only one who thinks that, I think. I don't know anybody else who thinks that we have the greatest economy in the world. And, the fact of the matter is that we find ourselves in a situation where
history. There's never been. And as far as Afghanistan is concerned, I was getting out of Afghanistan, but we were getting out with dignity, with strength, with power. He got out. It was the most embarrassing day in the history of our country's life.
President Trump, over the last 8 years, under both of your administrations, the national debt soared to record highs.
Go straight on.
And according to a new nonpartisan analysis, President Trump, your administration approved $8.4 trillion in new debt, while so far, President Biden, you've approved $4.3 trillion in new debt. So, former President Trump, many of the tax cuts that you signed into law are set to expire next year. You want to extend them and go even further, you say. With the U.S. facing trillion-dollar deficits and record debt, why should top earners and corporations pay even less in taxes than they do now?
Because the tax cuts spurred the greatest economy that we've ever seen just prior to COVID. And even after COVID, it was so strong that we were able to get through COVID much better than just about any other country. But we spurred, that tax spurred. Now, when we cut the taxes, as an example, the corporate tax was cut down to 21% from 39%, plus beyond that. We took in more revenue with much less tax, and companies were bringing back trillions of dollars back into our country. The country was going like never before, and we were ready to start paying down debt. We were ready to start using the liquid gold right under our feet, the oil and gas right under our feet. We were going to have something that nobody else has had. We got hit with COVID. We did a lot to fix it. I gave him an unbelievable situation with all of the therapeutics and all of the things that we came up with. We gave him something great. Remember, more people died under his administration, even though we had largely fixed it. More people died under his administration than our administration, and we were right in the middle of it, something which a lot of people don't like to talk about. But we had far more people dying in his administration. He did the mandate, which is a disaster, mandating it. The vaccine went out, he did a mandate on the vaccine, which is the thing that people most objected to about the vaccine. And he did a very poor job, just a very poor job. And I will tell you, not only were we there, but throughout the entire world, we're no longer respected as a country. They don't respect our leadership. They don't respect the United States anymore. We're like a third world nation between weaponization of his election, trying to go after his political opponent. All of the things he's done, we've become like a third world nation. And it's a shame. The damage he's done to our country, and I'd love to ask him, and will, why he allowed millions of people to come in here from prisons, jails, and mental institutions to come into our country and destroy our country.
President Trump, we will get to immigration later in this block. President Biden, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to this question about the national debt.
He had the largest national debt of any president for you. Number one. Number two, that $2 trillion tax cut benefited the very wealthy. Now, what I'm going to do is fix the tax system, for example. Now we have 1,000 trillionaires. Billionaires. And what's happening? They're in a situation where they, in fact, pay 8.2% taxes. If they just paid 24%, 25%, either one of those numbers, they raised $500 million. In a 10-year period. We would be able to wipe out his debt. We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our health care system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with COVID, with dealing with everything we had to do with we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare because all of these people are coming in. They're putting them on Medicare. They're putting them on Social Security. They're going to destroy Social Security. This man is going to single-handedly destroy Social Security. These millions and millions of people coming in, they're trying to put them on Social Security. He will wipe out Social Security. He will wipe out Medicare. So he was right in the way he finished that sentence. And it's a shame. What's happened to our country in the last 4 years is not to be believed. Foreign countries, I'm friends with a lot of people. They cannot believe what happened to the United States of America. We're no longer respected. They don't like us. We give them everything they want, and they think we're stupid. They think we're very stupid people. What we're doing for other countries, and they do nothing for us. What this man has done is absolutely criminal.
Thank you, President Trump. Tana?
This is the first presidential election since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. This morning, the court ruled on yet another abortion case, temporarily allowing emergency abortions to continue in Idaho, despite that state's restrictive ban. Former President Trump, you take credit for the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, which returned the issue of abortion to the states.
Correct.
However, the federal government still plays a role in whether or not women have access to abortion pills. They're used in about 2/3 of all abortions. As president, would you block abortion medication?
First of all, the Supreme Court just approved the abortion pill, and I agree with their decision to have done that, and I will not block it. And if you look at this whole question that you're asking, complex but not really complex. 51 years ago, you had Roe v. Wade, and everybody wanted to get it back to the states. Everybody, without exception. Democrats, Republicans, Liberals. Everybody wanted it back. Religious leaders. And what I did is put 3 great Supreme Court justices on the court, and they happened to vote in favor of killing Roe v. Wade and moving it back to the states. This is something that everybody wanted. Now, 10 years ago or so, they started talking about how many weeks and how many this, and getting into other things. But every legal scholar throughout the world, the most respected, wanted it brought back to the states. I did that. Now the states are working it out. If you look at Ohio, it was a decision that was an end result. It was a little bit more liberal than you would have thought. Kansas, I would say the same thing. Texas is different. Florida is different. But they're all making their own decisions right now. And right now, the states control it. That's the vote of the people. Like Ronald Reagan, I believe in the exceptions. I am a person that believes. And frankly, I think it's important to believe in the exceptions. Some people, you have to follow your heart. Some people don't believe in that. But I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. I think it's very important. Some people don't. Follow your heart. But you have to get elected also. And because that has to do with other things. You got to get elected. The problem they have is they're radical because they will take the life of a child in the 8th month, the 9th month, and even after birth. After birth, if you look at the former governor of Virginia, he was willing to do this. He said, we'll put the baby aside and we'll determine what we do with the baby, meaning we'll kill the baby. What happened is we brought it back to the states, and the country is now coming together on this issue. It's been a great thing.
Thank you. President Biden?
It's been a terrible thing, what you've done. The fact is that the vast majority of constitutional scholars support Roe support Roe. And that's this idea that all cancer is just ridiculous. And this is the guy who says the state should be able to have it. We're in a state where in 6 weeks,
turn right.
You don't even know whether you're pregnant or not, but you cannot see a doctor and have him decide on what your circumstances are, whether you need help. The idea that states are able to do this is no one saying we're going to turn civil rights back to the states. Let each state have a different rule. But there's so many young women who've been, including the young woman who just murdered, and he went to the funeral. The idea that she was murdered by an you talk about that. Here's the deal. There's a lot of young women being raped by their in-laws, by their spouses, brothers and sisters. It's just ridiculous. They can do nothing about it. And they try to arrest them when they cross state line.
Thank you.
There have been many young women murdered by the same people he allows to go across our border. We have a border that's the most dangerous place anywhere in the world. Consider the most dangerous place anywhere in the world. And he opened it up.
Go straight on.
Students are coming into our country, and they are raping and killing women. And it's a terrible thing. As far as the abortion is concerned, it is now back with the states. The states have voted. In many cases, it's frankly a very liberal decision. In many cases, it's the opposite. But they're voting, and it's bringing it back to the vote of the people, which is what everybody wanted, including the founders, if they knew about this issue, which frankly they didn't. But they would have known that everybody wanted it brought back. Ronald Reagan wanted it brought back. He wasn't able to get it. Everybody wanted it brought back, and many presidents had tried to get it back. I was the one to do it. And again, this gives it the vote of the people, and that's where they wanted it. Every legal scholar wanted it that way.
Staying on the topic of abortion, President Biden, 7 states, I'll let you do that. This is the same topic. 7 states have no legal restrictions on how far into a pregnancy a woman can obtain an abortion. Do you support any legal limits on how late a woman should be able to terminate a pregnancy?
I support Roe v. Wade. It's like 3 trimesters. First time between the woman and the doctor. Second time between the doctor and an extreme situation. Third time between the doctor, between the woman and the state. The idea that the politicians, the founders want the politicians to be the ones making decisions about women's health is ridiculous. It's a last for no politician to make that decision. A doctor should make that decision. That's how it should be done. That's what you're going to do. And if I'm elected, I'm going to restore Roe v. Wade.
You can take the life of the baby in the 9th month and even after birth. Where some states, Democrat run, take it after birth. Again, the governor, former governor of Virginia, put the baby down, then we decide what to do with it. So he's willing, as we say, rip the baby out of the womb in the 9th month and kill the baby. Nobody wants that to happen. Democrat or Republican, nobody wants it to happen.
That is simply not true. That Roe v. Wade does not provide for that. That's not the circumstance. Only when his life is in danger, she's going to die. That's the only circumstance in which that can happen. But we are not for late-term abortion, period.
Roe v. Wade, you have late-term abortion. You can do whatever you want, depending on the state. You can do whatever you want. We don't think that's a good thing. We think it's a radical thing. We think the Democrats are the radicals, not the Republicans.
For 51 years, that was the law. 51 years, constitutional scholarship said it was the right way to go. 51 years, and it was taken away because this guy, who's very conservative, was on the Supreme Court. It takes credit for taking it away. What's he going to do? What's he going to do with the fact that if the MAGA Republicans, he gets elected, and the MAGA Republicans control the Congress, and they pass a universal ban on abortion, period, across the board, at 6 weeks or 7 or 8 or 10, something very, very conservative. Is he going to sign that bill? I'll veto it. He'll sign it.
Thank you.
Let's turn on to the issue of immigration and border security. President Biden, a record number of migrants have illegally crossed the southern border under watch. Overwhelming border states, overburdening cities such as New York and Chicago, but in some cases causing real safety and security concerns. Given that, why should voters trust you to solve this crisis?
Because we work very hard to get a bipartisan agreement that not only change all of that, made sure that we don't have a situation where you had no circumstance where they can come across the border with the number of border police there are now. We significantly increased the number of asylums.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the time is 9:22. Since I'm going to make it to daily, we need the matchup that will be for you about for tonight. And my husband, I want to thank you all for the foods that you need and audience. Thank you for the show. On my here, and I got almost 20, but I don't know when I may probably retire. So I don't need to do that. I also thank for those who helped me to the club, and hope to see you on Monday, live show. That's kind of like ran again now. Anyway, thank you quickly, and last good night. Well done. So, better good night, sleep, and hope to see you on this weekend. Night.
That's the only terrorist that's there. I'm not saying that
Go
no
straight
terrorists
on.
ever got through, but the idea they're emptying their prisons, we're welcoming these people, that's simply not true. There's no data to support what he said. Once again, he's exaggerating, he's lying.
President Trump, staying on the topic of immigration, you've said that you're going to carry out, quote, the largest domestic deportation operation in American history, unquote. Does that mean that you will deport every undocumented immigrant in America, including those who have jobs, including those whose spouses are citizens, and including those who have lived here for decades? And if so, how will you do it?
Just 1 second. He said we killed 3 people. The people we killed are al-Baghdadi and Soleimani, the 2 greatest terrorists, biggest terrorists anywhere in the world. And it had a huge impact on everything, not just border, on everything. He's the one that killed people with a bad weapon, including hundreds or thousands of people dying, and also killing our citizens when they come in. We
Go straight on.
Right now in a rat's nest. They're killing our people in New York, in California, in every state in the union, because we don't have borders anymore. Every state is now a border. And because of his ridiculous, insane, and very stupid policies, people are coming in and they're killing our citizens at a level that we've never seen. We call it migrant crowd. I call it migrant crowd. They're killing our citizens at a level that we've never seen before. And you're reading it like these 3 incredible young girls over the last few days. One of them, I just spoke to the mother, and he just had the funeral for this girl, 12 years old. This is horrible what's taking place. What's taking place in our country, we're literally an uncivilized country now. He doesn't want it to be. He just doesn't know. He opened the borders. Nobody's ever seen anything like. And we have to get a lot of these people out, and we have to get them out fast, because they're going to destroy our country. Just take a look at where they're living. They're living in luxury hotels in New York City and other places. Our veterans are on the street. They're dying because he doesn't care about our veterans. He doesn't care. He doesn't like the military at all. And he doesn't care about our veterans. Nobody but worse. I had the highest approval rating for veterans taking care of the VA. He has the worst. He's gotten rid of all the things that I approved. Choice that I got through Congress. All of the different things I approved, they abandoned. We had by far the highest, and now it's down in less than half, because he's done all these great things that we did. And I think he did it just because I approved it, which is crazy. But he has killed so many people at our border by allowing all of these people to come in. And it's a very sad day in America.
President Biden, you have the mic.
Every single thing he said is a lie. Every single one. For example, veterans are a hell of a lot better off since I passed the PACT Act. 1 million of them now have insurance, and their families have it. Their families have it because what happened,